When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. In today's video, I do want to talk about the opening scene of House of the Dragon, episode 1 of season 2. I am very interested what you guys think, but the Cregan Stark and Jace talk on the wall kind of gives off a lot of foreshadowing and is kind of questionable when you think about Ned Stark in the main story. Because Ned does not seem like he thinks the others are a thing, that that's just some sort of legend. But even just a couple hundred years past, if you look at, Cregan Stark, he wholeheartedly believes that the others and the White Walkers are a threat to the realm. So what changed from that moment to Ned? And also, what does Cregan Stark, or Cregan Stark, however you say his name, I've heard it's pronounced a couple different ways, how is it that he knows some information that seems to foreshadow Aegon's dream? I'm gonna try to answer that in today's video, but let me know what you guys think. But before we get into the video, if you did want to become a Patreon, or remember, you do get videos early and all of my House of the Dragon kind of exclusive content in terms of I do all of my episode reviews for members and Patreons. If you want more of that, consider that. Thank you to the people that already support me on there as well. So let's talk about it. So I've rewatched the scene a couple times now, and what it seems to imply is that Torrhen Stark bent the knee for some other reason outside of just he believed that they couldn't beat Aegon the Conqueror, which was true. They could not beat Aegon the Conqueror. But it seems to imply also that there was some understanding here that the Targaryens could bring unity to the Seven Kingdoms. And this is why I kind of think that Aegon had a conversation with Torrhen about why he was actually conquering the Seven Kingdoms. Remember, with the introduction of Aegon's dream, that was something that was never in the book. It was never really said or alluded to really in the book. It has been something that George has kind of brought to the table with the show. So now when you look at events in the book, you can maybe kind of keep in the back of your mind, maybe this was done because of Aegon's dream or something else. Because the only Targaryen's head we're ever in is really just Daenerys. And Daenerys obviously is not going to know about Aegon's dream because that would have seemed like it had been lost to history at some point, or rather, Rhaegar found out about this information, but it wouldn't have been passed to Viserys or Daenerys. They were too young. So in terms of Aegon's dream, I could see a scenario in which Aegon ended up telling Torrhen what his dream more or less was. He is conquering and trying to unite the realm, partly because of this dream he had that there was going to be some war with the others, and that he needed to be on the throne, or at least the Targaryens needed to be on the throne with their dragons to be able to unite against the threat of the others. And so that could mean a lot, right? That could be a major reason as to why Torrhen Stark bends the knee to Aegon, why it seems like the Starks don't take a much interest in the conflicts in the South, even though it makes sense to who they are and things like that, but because they had more of a focused interest on the wall. Because think about this idea where we're looking at Cregan Stark and his monologue at the very beginning where, some of his family members, 1 out of every 10 goes to the wall to serve honorably and loyally to the Night's Watch. Well, in this whole, little moment, Cregan Stark saying, I need my men to make sure that there's no threat from the others. He even alludes to it to Jace that beyond the wall there is death. So how did that information then get lost? Because when we get to Ned, he doesn't believe it at all, right? He executes a man believing that he was a madman. A madman sees what a madman sees, more or less is what he tells, Bran, for instance. And so we have to question, where did that information go? Is it a plot hole that the show kind of introduced, or is it more explainable? Some people in the community have already really looked at the idea that Ned was not brought up, really in the North. Yes, he spent some of his youth in the North, and he would have gone back and forth between the Vale and the North, but he was never the heir, right? And Ned doesn't become the heir until after his father and his older brother die. So if, Rickard Stark had told Brandon about what was going on, but also he didn't tell Ned or Benjen or Lyanna, well, that's really interesting, right? Because then it would have died. That knowledge of the others and the White Walkers would have died with them. Or maybe it dies with some other Stark. All it takes is one Stark who doesn't care, doesn't believe in what that stuff is, just takes one bad one to ruin it, right? Because then that prophecy kind of dies with the Starks. So It is interesting to think about because it really explains a lot of the actions of the North during all this time. We never see them get involved in a lot of these main conflicts. They very rarely come south at all. If you think about even during Maegor's conflict, that really was another civil war that impacted almost all of Westeros, the North did not even bother with that conflict, which points to this idea that they were preparing for this threat of the others to come and start the Great War. It is interesting because we have very little information to actually speculate on it. And it's even weirder because the show omits this idea of the Pack of Ice and Fire, where Jaehaerys' daughter would marry into the Starks. That doesn't seem to end up happening in the show, or at least it didn't happen on screen. Maybe in the future it could be in a flashback, or Cregan Stark can say that it happened, but we ourselves have no confirmation of it because we didn't see it on screen. Who knows? Number of ways they could still do it with it not being shown here, because it could also make sense if Cregan Stark knows of this information about what Aegon told Torrhen. It could understand why in the future he may do certain events, right? I won't spoil it for people that have not actually don't actually know what happens during the Dance of the Dragons, but there is an event where you can maybe look at his actions and go, yeah, maybe that could add up to why he, eventually does do something. But let me know what you guys all think in the comments. It's a short little video today, a little discussion that House the Dragon brought up in only like a minute or two of footage that really has left the community with a lot of questions.